Welcome back to the channel, welcome back to the vlog. My name is Darren, I'm a landscape photographer. I'm based here in beautiful Ireland. Now, today I want to talk about the classic subject in landscape photography, and that is waterfalls. We're going to look at how you can improve the art of capturing waterfalls by understanding shutter speeds, use of telephoto lenses and polarizing filters, plus a few more extra tips and advice. Now, if you've ever been unsure about how to shoot waterfalls, this video is exactly for you. Let's go. Shutter speed is absolutely key when shooting waterfalls. It controls how the movement of the water is captured, and it can entirely change the mood and the feel of your photo. Now, when you use a fast shutter speed, anything from 1/500 of a second or higher, you can freeze the motion of the water, capturing every droplet in detail. Now, this is great for showcasing the power and the force of fast-flowing waterfalls. But if you want to create that smooth, silky effect, you'll need to slow the shutter down. Now, something like a quarter of a second or even several seconds will blur the water into a dreamy, ethereal look. To get this effect, you'll need a tripod and possibly an ND filter to block out the excess light, especially on brighter days. Now, waterfall photography is similar to seascape photography in terms of shutter speeds. However, you do have the advantage of the water flow being constant, unlike that of the waves. Now, my tip here is to not fall into the long exposure trap. If you take a shot for more than a few seconds, then you will lose all the texture in that water and it effectively turn to milk. Waterfalls are often part of a larger landscape, but sometimes zooming in on specific details can make for some fantastic shots. A telephoto lens, or anything from 70mm and above, really helps you to isolate parts of the waterfall that might get lost in the wider shot. Now, this is perfect for emphasizing the textures of the water or any moss-covered rocks, or the connection between the water and the landscape around it. Using a telephoto lens also compresses the elements into your shot, which can help focus attention on the waterfall itself rather than the entire scene. It's important you just make sure you're keeping an eye on your depth of field. Using a wider aperture can blur the background, placing more emphasis on this waterfall. This is a technique that I have done on many occasions, and I would urge you to give it a go yourself. Now, an absolute game changer when it comes to photographing waterfalls is a polarizing filter. A polarizer reduces glare from wet surfaces like rocks and water, and it makes the colors also more vibrant. And it also makes the details crispier. It also helps you to cut through any reflections on the water so that you can see into pools or capture the texture of the water itself. You can rotate the filter to adjust the level of polarization. But one thing to be aware of is if you're using a wide-angle lens, be careful not to overdo it. The sky can turn an unnaturally dark color if you push the polarizer too far. Now, this is the only filter also that you cannot replicate in post-production, so it's vital that you use it when you're out and about. Now, a cautionary tip also here is to always adjust the polarizer when you change composition, as it may not be set up properly for the next shot, and you'll lose all of its wonderful effects. Now, composition is key in any type of photography, and waterfalls, of course, are no exception. When you're composing a waterfall shot, think as always about leading lines. Now, the flow of the water itself can serve as a natural guide for the viewer's eye to go through the image. And again, similar to seascape, it will actually work well for the shot. But also important to remember that unlike seascape, the water is constant. Including a foreground element like rocks, trees, or even the surrounding landscape can add depth into your composition. And also look for natural frames like branches, overhanging rocks, or even the lines in the surrounding area in the terrain to help draw attention directly to the waterfall. An also good tip is to look for contrasting elements in the scene. So fallen leaves that have either landed on a rock or were somehow placed perfectly on the rock in your foreground, then they can be the difference between a good shot and a great shot. Waterfalls are often tucked away in dense forests, which can obviously make lighting tricky. Overcast days are usually ideal for this because you get soft, diffuse light, which helps you to balance your exposure. Plus, you're not having to deal with any harsh highlights or dark shadows. But if you are shooting on a sunny day, focus on either early in the morning or late afternoon to get that softer golden light. Now, if you have to shoot in harsh midday sun, it can make things a lot more difficult, especially when you're trying to capture details in both the shadows and the water. Now, a graduated ND filter can help balance the exposure between the bright sky and the darker waterfall. It gives you more control over the final image. But I find that using a full ND filter works best, as it helps you to have an overall balanced exposure. Important here, be careful with the shadow areas, as they may end up being underexposed when you're exposing for the flowing water. You may find that you've trouble getting all of the entire scene in focus, as the foreground is just too close to your camera. And rather than retreat back and lose that key element, you can instead take multiple shots and then blend them all together later when editing. This is known as focus stacking. It's where you take a number of shots of the scene and focus on the foreground, the midground and the background, and then put them all together in post. Now, you may also find that it takes more than 3 shots, and it depends on the scene overall, because if you're shooting somewhere, you have to take a shot of a key element. So you might have to take 4 shots or 5 shots just to be sure, but it's best to be having them and looking at them rather than looking for them later. Another trick to have up your sleeve is to time blend, as my buddy Gavin likes to call it. This is where you take different exposures of the scene at different speeds, and then you blend them together later also. This can be great when you want to smooth out a pool of water maybe in front of you and then doing a long exposure for that, but you also want to keep some of the texture in the flowing water in the waterfall itself. Now, last but certainly not least is safety. So waterfall photography can be dangerous if you're not careful. Wet rocks, of course, are slippery. Fast-moving water can be unpredictable. It's important that you always watch your footing and make sure your tripod is stable, and avoid getting too close to the edge, especially when you're setting up your gear. Now, a great shot isn't worth risking your safety for. Sometimes even the rocks that are under the water can be treacherous, and you'll only know this when you step on them. So keep your wits about you, have good grip boots or good grip Wellington boots, and also use your tripod as that extra piece for balance. The other thing to be aware of here is, of course, bring spare socks. You are going to get wet, and if you're not, then you haven't gotten close enough to the action. Waterfall photography can be both rewarding and challenging, but by mastering your shutter speed, lens choices, filters and techniques, you can create stunning images that capture the beauty and the power of nature. Now, my advice as well is, if you have a waterfall close to home, then I'd really urge you to go and use it for practice, as these skills will then come back to you when you're at another location and you won't be struggling or feel intimidated by the scene that's in front of you. And you never know, you might actually get a shot or two that you like from that waterfall down the road that you've always just passed by. Thank you very much as always for watching. If you found this video helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more tips, tutorials on landscape photography. And let me know in the comments what your favourite waterfall is to photograph. And hopefully, if I'm lucky, I'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much. Slán go fóill.